Hey family, my name's Shelly. I'm grateful to be an alcoholic and an addict, and I am the sober psychic. So, if anyone has been waiting for the second half of my story, I have to be honest. I'm still I'm still healing from the first part of it. Again, it brought up a whole bunch of stuff that had been repressed. So until I can muster up the second part of it, I'm going to continue to make videos from the YouTube topics or from the whatever spirit tells me to do or suggests that I do. So, speaking of healing from those memories from part one of my story, and I will put that link in the description box if you haven't seen that and you're interested. That brings me to the topic the Spirit was directing me to talk about today, which is mental health and drug addiction and alcoholism. So I was looking up some statistics, and the most recent statistics that I could find were from a little bit earlier this year, and those statistics were that 37% of alcoholics have mental health issues and 53% of drug abusers have mental health issues. So I'm just going to speak from the hip here. Obviously, and I can only speak for myself, or what I've witnessed or what I've heard from fellow recovering people or unrecovering people who aren't in the programs or in the process of recovering. So that those percentages, 37% of alcoholics and 53% of drug addicts, that made perfect sense to me. Because with alcoholism, there's everyone who's not, well, everyone who's a drug addict either, but everyone who's an alcoholic doesn't have debilitating or really serious mental health issues. They simply have an allergy to alcohol. When they ingest it, it produces the phenomenon of craving, and then the process of bottoms and getting sick and tired of being sick and tired has to take place in order for that to for us to make a firm decision on whether to get ourselves together or not. So again, I am a drug addict and an alcoholic. I do identify as an alcoholic. When I speak at a support group, I identify as an alcoholic, so I don't forget that I'm an alcoholic, because my brain will tell me, you're not an alcoholic. You're only an alcoholic if you think you are. You're not an alcoholic just because they said you are. I have to be reminded of that consistently on a weekly basis, and in a lot of ways on a daily basis. I am reminded that I'm an alcoholic just by being aware of my thought processes and how I look at things and how I process the things that go on around me. So again, I can only speak from my personal experiences, and I was given, I call it the double whammy, in a lot of regards, alcoholic and addict, mental health issues and alcoholism, mental health issues and drug addiction, and just whatever there is out there. I've probably experienced it mental health wise, except for psychosis or manic depression. But the usuals, depression, anxiety, debilitating, to extremes. But for me, it's partially a genetic thing. It's many people in my family, on both sides of my family, of my biological family, had depression and alcoholism or addiction, and that's why I call it the double whammy. I was predisposed to mental health issues, and I also believe that when a person, a child, say, is around an abusive household or has consistent abuse occurring in their lives, that they can become depressed, obviously, and they can become bipolar, or they can become form psychosis because their brains don't know how to deal with walking on eggshells and never being sure of how specific people in their lives are going to be feeling from one moment to the next. And that was my life. I was never sure how one of my, I don't want to point fingers, but one of my parents, I was never sure how they were going to behave from one moment to the next. Had to be on guard all the time, and statistically, it's around the age of 7 or 8 that a person will start feeling the symptoms of depression and anxiety. And that was about right for me, textbook. About 7 years old, I realized this wasn't going to change, and I was powerless over it. And I became severely depressed and disinterested, and kind of like a robot. Okay, but now I was born in the 60s, right in the middle of the 60s, so mental health wasn't a big thing back then. You were deemed bad or evil or bad. Again, that was, or just, it just wasn't addressed the same as it is now, and thank goodness that it is addressed now. That people have an option now to get some type of support or some kind of help for those issues. Now, my mental health is directly corresponds to my alcoholism and my drug addiction. So if I don't keep my mental health in check, or at the very least be very mindful of what I'm thinking, or catch myself having repetitive thoughts that are detrimental to my self-esteem or whatever, I have to be on top of that. I have to be very aware of what I'm thinking. Because if I'm not thinking properly, then I will talk myself sooner or later into a drink, and then that will lead to the drugs. So I'm looking for words. I have a hard time speaking. I have a hard time speaking verbally. If we could communicate telepathically, I would do that much better. So when I was, and I shared this in my part one of my story, that when I was very little, I started to become an escape artist with whatever I could get my hands on. And as a child, it was reading, and then it was other things, and then things just progressed until I had my first drink, and before I even had my first drink, I was already testing other drugs, and when I was a teenager, it was speed. That was the big thing. The little pink footballs, or the little blue ones, the white ones with the blue specks. Those were the big things back then. And I had already been test driving those to see how those would, anything to take me out of my reality. And I gotta tell you, I don't think I particularly enjoyed taking speed. I mean, I'm already high strung, right? Already had anxiety by then, for years by then. So it was still something I could get out of my own reality with. So Untreated mental health issues are absolutely an open door for alcoholism and drug addiction. Again, anything to get us out of our own realities. So when I was growing up, I was taught to process things in two ways. And I just came off a support group that I attend. And one of the topics was, partially was what I'm about to talk about the being conditioned to be dishonest. Okay, I learned at a very young age, way before I became depressed and anxious, that I learned at a very young age that if I told the truth, the consequences were going to be severe. But if I lied, there was a chance that I might be able to get out of it. So I would lie. And I just conditioned myself to lie. And the circumstances conditioned me. I was a child. We don't take responsibility for the things we do when we're children. We don't start taking responsibility for the things we do or have done in our past until we were old enough to make a conscious opinion, until we started forming opinions about things. Then I feel that's when I became responsible for my actions. So when I was being accused of things that I didn't do, which happened all the time. It was ridiculous. It happened all the time. I would be accused of doing this, or my mother heard, I was doing that, and I'd get in trouble for that, and I would, for the most part, I was minding my own business, right? I mean, I was an honest kid, but I was kind of withdrawn because of what was going on in my home life. So, because, again, born in the 60s, children are to be seen and not heard. And so I didn't really have much to say. Didn't have many friends. The amount of friends I had was very, or who my friends were was very controlled. If they weren't involved in the church, I wasn't allowed to have that friend. So, I was conditioned to be dishonest. I was conditioned to believe that I was just a bad kid, or I was an evil child, or I was going to hell, because there was no such thing as mental health issues. And if one existed, then you went to the asylum. Period, point blank. And that's the way things were done. I know I was sent to my pastor when I was about 12. I was sent to my pastor, and the big thing in my house was, one minute there's no such thing as sex, and the next minute it was sex is bad. So I was very confused. So the bigger part of me heard the sex is bad part. So I was extremely young. I was a teenager, but I was extremely young when I first became sexually active. I was like, well, if it's so bad, I want to see what's so bad about it. And found out it wasn't bad at all. But then the mental health issues caused me to walk around with a bunch of guilt because of it. Now, I know that I must have been exhibiting some types of behaviors. I must have started acting different, and I think I was less gullible. I was a little less easy to control, because I felt a sense of freedom with that. So, again, here's all these untreated mental health issues. And it's no wonder that people with mental health issues want to get some relief, because that's all that's about, is getting some relief, right? It's like, I feel awful all the time. I feel terrible 24/7. No matter what I do, I can't find anything that makes me feel better. And after a while, I became just very discouraged. So I just looked for other ways to make myself feel good. And when I was a teenager, it was the feeling good lasted a lot longer than it did by the time I was ready to get myself together as far as alcohol was concerned, and drugs and pills. I did do pills a lot more than I wanted to admit for forever, even into sobriety. When I was drinking, they were different. I wasn't interested in doing the hard drugs anymore, but the narcotics I was interested in doing those, and because they were different. They made me feel. They gave me a sense of well-being, which obviously I think is why people get addicted to narcotics, because it gives you a sense of well-being. And I actually didn't consciously realize that I had a problem with the pills as well as the alcohol at the end of my drinking until I shared part one of my story. So that kind of gives you a hint on how things come up when you share your story. For real, share your story, not just piecemealing it here and there because of time restraints. So I've got these untreated mental health issues, and I didn't know where to turn. I didn't know what to do. I felt hopeless. There was no way for me to get out of it, to get to a place where I was going to feel better. But the whole time, there was still this little sliver of hope that I would feel better. That there was something or someone, usually someone, would come along that would make me feel better. So, in a way, I formed an addiction to the opposite sex. Because that took me out of self as well. Now, the biggest part of me, excuse me, allergy eyes, the biggest part of me back then wanted to please everybody else. I was thinking back on while I was growing up, and I got beat a lot. I got beat on a lot. And it got to the point where it happened so much that when I was told to stop crying, I would abruptly suck it in, and I'd stop crying. And I call that being suggestible. I became very suggestible. If someone told me to do something, I did it. Didn't matter what it was. If I was told to do something by someone else, I would do it. Because I was conditioned to do so. Stop crying, okay. You don't feel that, okay. There's nothing wrong with you, okay. You're just bad, all right. So if any of you went through that or is going through that now even, in your current situation, there's hope. You don't have to be stuck. Ask yourself, how many times do I have to hit the same bottom before I get sick of it and do something about it? Being an alcoholic and being an addict is not anyone's fault. I'm not blaming my home life for me being an addict and alcoholic. It just is the way it is. I came to this planet, chose the parents and the situation, chose that for this lesson. I decided to clear up all my karmic debt in this lifetime. And the best way for me to do that was to be an alcoholic and an addict. So it's not anyone's fault that they're an alcoholic or an addict. But we still have to take responsibility for our actions. Not blame. Those are two different things. Two completely different things. Blame is finger pointing. You did, even if you're talking to yourself, you did this and you did that, you're an awful person. That's blame. Responsibility is, okay, I did this, and I did that, and I did the other. And I take full responsibility for that. What can I do to change it? And I have to tell you, if you're not sober and you're not clean, it's not going to change. It just isn't. Happy isn't just going to magically fall in your lap. Happy's going to come from here. It's very humbling to admit to being an alcoholic or an addict. And then again, it's very humbling all over again to admit that it makes your life unmanageable, that it makes your life a mess, the drinking and or drugging. And I don't think I felt like this when I was humbled, when I knew I was an alcoholic, as I've already said, but I didn't realize it was making my life a mess. Or that I was powerless over it, making my life a mess. But in retrospect, I see where it was a relief to be humbled by admitting that I had a problem. It wasn't going to clear itself up by itself. And nothing I could do on my own was going to clear it up. And admitting that it was making my life a mess. I had to admit those things, all of those things. And they didn't all come, those admittances didn't all come at once. And sometimes I think back and I think, so I didn't get sober until I was 52. So, do my math. Yeah, 52. So I didn't get sober till I was 52, and sometimes a part of me says, oh my God, the time I wasted. And I'm not ever going to suggest that anyone, you just keep going, keep doing that drinking and drugging, keep at it, you're doing a great job. I'm never going to say that. But I cannot, for my own mental health, go back and say, I wish I would have done it sooner. Well, there's parts of me that does wish I would have done it sooner, but the truth is I wasn't ready. It wasn't in my soul contract. It wasn't in my soul contract to do it sooner, or I would have. I did it at exactly the time I was supposed to, for a reason. When I talk about learning lessons, I don't mean God's going to teach you a lessons. I mean actual lessons that come from experience, experiential lessons, like school lesson. I call this Earth School. I came here and I did exactly what I was supposed to do. And you came here and you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. So, don't ever say I wish I would have done it sooner. Because wishing doesn't make it happen either. Wishing doesn't change the past. It doesn't make anything different. Taking affirmative action is the only thing that makes anything different. All we have is right now. Right this minute. What am I going to choose? Am I going to choose to get it together? Or am I going to choose to keep going and doing what I'm doing? These are the questions I had to ask myself. When one of my children was pregnant and she said, I don't want that woman around this baby, that was my wake-up call. That was my bottom. And I had begged to get sober. I begged higher power to get sober. And I got it. In the only way I could have understood it. It could not have been a gentle awakening. That wasn't going to happen for me. I was beyond that. I was beyond anything gentle waking me up. I needed what I got, and I got what I needed. So, if there are mental health issues that are going on, even if you're in recovery and you're not looking at those mental health issues and you're not seeking outside help, please do so. I understand the fear because I've been through the fear. I've been in and out of therapy for 25 years. The fear is, if I talk about it, it's going to hurt. Well, you know what? It hurts anyway. So let's be honest about that. If you want to get and or stay sober or clean, you have got to address your mental health issues. because those will put you right back out. You'll be using it in no time. You have to address them. And I generally don't tell anybody they have to do anything, but I know the statistics on people staying sober and clean who take care of their mental health issues is a lot higher. The success rate is a lot higher than those who don't. Because those who don't are nothing but dry drunks or dry addicts. And if you don't know what that means, and sorry, if you guys do know what it means, this is just for those who don't. A dry drunk or a dry addict is somebody who is not taking proper steps, including outside mental health steps, to keep themselves sober and or clean. They're just winging it, and they're still suffering. So if you're still suffering, make it a priority to check out someone who can help you, someone who has no stake in you on a personal level, but cares about you. And that's what a therapist is. That's what a psychiatrist is. They have no personal stake in you. And they're not going to blab your business all over the place. You are an anonymous, your information is anonymous. They're not going to share with anybody. And it is going to bring up some pain. But again, you're already in pain. Better out than in. If you can find someone that you can learn to trust to get this stuff out of you, you will feel like the weight of the world is off your shoulders. And it is an extremely important part of sobriety. So that's all I've got. I hope this helped somebody. I hope this you can relate to this. If anybody can relate to that, please leave me a comment. I would love to hear it, and I will respond to it. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful day or evening.